What's good, everybody? Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't done so already, right there on your device. It's really simple. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software sales leaders and salespeople. Go to the jdavidgroup.com/hiring to learn more, or go to the jdavidgroup.com/looking if you're looking for your next big challenge. My guest today is Brent Taylor. He's the Regional Vice President of Sales in Canada for MuleSoft, which got acquired by Salesforce a couple of years ago, which is one of the world's leading platforms for building application networks. Brent, welcome to Over Quota.
Good to be here.
So let's start with what I just ended with, which is tell us a little bit about yourself and your time at Salesforce/MuleSoft, and then tell us a bit more about the value proposition at MuleSoft.
Sure. So I've been at Salesforce/MuleSoft a little over 12 years, which is an eternity, and especially in a salesperson's usual journey of 2 years here, 2 years there, 2 years here.
Right.
I think one of the reasons that has kept me here, one, when I started, there was about 100 people in the Toronto office. Now we're up to a little over 2,000 in Canada, with offices in Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, of course. And I've probably had 4 or 5 different careers in one company, which has been, I've been very fortunate to have. So, so the role I'm in now, I manage the sales team for Canada for MuleSoft, which is an integration platform as a service. And really what we believe is you can make your back office systems as responsive as the latest cloud software APIs. And if you do that, you can move faster, you can be more secure, you can adjust when, let's say, a global pandemic hits and all of a sudden everybody needs to be digital. And we've been able to see our customers do that. So it's been a really exciting time, actually.
I want to ask this question just because I'm simply curious, and it helps MuleSoft, but I don't care. Give me an example of that when you say the back office systems can run as fast as any front, office cloud-based system.
Well, one of the things that attracted me to MuleSoft and the integration space as a whole is the problem we solve every single company in the world has, which is how do we get data from over here to over there? And that problem is getting bigger with the explosion of, cloud applications. You look at the MarTech space. MarTech space has 2,600 different applications that you could buy for just marketing technology, right? You think of a customer transaction of, a simple thing of going online and buying a dog bed from your favorite pet retailer. That probably passes through about 35 different systems. That one transaction, right? So how do you, and a lot of that's really hard to do. So an example, you asked for an example, that PetSmart or that pet retailer where you bought it, right? They have an on-premise ERP system. They have a web system. They have a mobile app system. They have marketing tools that they use to make sure that if you abandon your cart, that you get an email the next day with 10% off. All of those need to connect somehow, right? And if the old way of doing it was this point-to-point integrations, which end up with sort of a spaghetti code of, you think of a big plate of spaghetti, that's how a lot of integrations end up looking. Our methodology is a lot different. Our methodology takes sort of a layered approach to integration. There's the back-end system layers, so we decouple those. There's the business process layer. So imagine your company has one view of a customer and it's just a simple customer. And then the experience layer, like, do you want to show this on a mobile device or a web page or in your CRM or on an Apple Watch? Like where does it want to be? So, and if you're able to do that, it makes things faster because you start to be able to reuse what you've already built instead of having to redo it every time.
Yep. Okay. Fantastic. I want to go back to your Salesforce career in that, obviously, like you said, you've been in this organization for 12 years. How important, or what role have your mentors played, whether it be early there at Salesforce or continue throughout the time? And what have you learned from mentors that you hope to and are passing down to some people that you might be mentoring internally as well?
Yeah, so here we have a formal mentorship program where you can sign up and be assigned a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really useful for getting a sounding board outside of your bubble, which I think is important to get a good view. But there'll also be relationships that you develop that are less formal and more, hey, can I run an idea by you? And I've had the fortune of having some really incredible mentors who've given me some great kind of advice over the years, but none of the advice was, here's the thing that you should do. It's always a really good question that I should probably be asking myself because I probably have the answer somewhere. And that's something I try and do for the people that I'm now mentoring is I don't know their situation well enough. I don't know their specific thing well enough, but since I've had some really good questions asked to me, I can hopefully ask some really good questions and get thought-provoking answers that make you think instead of saying this is, because very rarely is there a one answer to the question.
A couple of questions based on that. I'm trying to think which one I want to go first without forgetting the other. Is that how you currently, let's say, for instance, you're sitting down with and going through a deal with one of your reps, or maybe it's a QBR meeting or something like that. Is that how you manage? In other words, you ask open-ended questions and, with giving them some space to find their own answers, as opposed to coming up with something prescriptive that may, that you might want to, naturally jump towards. But, talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. I've broken it down into kind of three buckets, which is, one is, are we learning something new? Are we teaching, right? And this is a skill that, this is new skill development, right?
Okay.
Maybe it's a new negotiation. Maybe it's a new discovery track. Maybe it's something like that. If you've done it before and you're just looking for an answer, then I get into the sort of coaching, which is, the question based. I hire really smart people who are hardworking and, know what they're doing. I want to, my job is to get stuff out of their way, not put stuff in their way to answer. So they usually know the answer. And my job is to kind of tease out how they would do it, because the way I do it might not be the way that they want to do it.
Right. And at the end of the day, you're looking for the end result being whatever the outcome should be, right? Whether that's a sale,
Exactly.
meeting, whatever, right? Right. Move something
Exactly.
through the pipeline. Got it. Obviously, Salesforce.com is a company that a lot of companies will want to emulate in terms of growth, in terms of industry presence, and all of that. With the sales, what is the sales training like at Salesforce? Or you can even start, I guess, with the onboarding and going from there. Tell me what that was like for those of us who haven't been involved in it.
Yeah, well, for me personally, it was about 12 years ago I went through that, so it's changed quite a bit since then. Mm-hmm. But there's a formal boot camp that you go to. We used to fly you down to San Francisco, but we're not doing flights anymore. So, but it's kind of nice to have a cohort that you start with, and it's people from across the company, right? It's not just a sales training; it's from across the company. You get introduced to different disciplines within the organization, and then so that's a 2-week program, and then there's really kind of a 30, 60, 90, 120 day. 180 day, and then a 1-year check-in of different milestones and training along the way. On top of that, there's a lot of training. There's sometimes it can feel like too much training in terms of kind of honing the skill or sharpening the saw.
Is there any technology right now that you guys are using to enable that onboarding in training now that people are fully distributed for the most part, or?
It may sound kind of self-serving, but we use Salesforce for that. It's part of our...
And so pardon my ignorance with that. Is there like a video component or something like that that you guys, or are you just using like what we're using, Zoom and that type of stuff?
Yeah, so we use Zoom, Google Hangouts. We're always trying out new things. I'm doing a session, and Miro is apparently a whiteboarding tool that I'm trying out for the first time next week. So we'll try that out, see if it works. If we like it, we'll keep using it. If not, try something new.
Try other things. Okay, cool. You mentioned you hire smart salespeople. How do you, during the interview process, how do you tease that out? When you say, how do you know that you're in front of a smart salesperson? When I say that, what do you think of? What are some of the things that manifest themselves during a conversation with you that says this person is smart and they'll be able to understand what we want them to do here?
It's a great question, and it's really hard. Interviewing is a very hard thing to do well, and a very expensive thing to do poorly. So I like to try and understand if my candidate understands the why behind, because in an interview, you're getting the best version of them, right? They tell you all the great stuff they do. They talk about how wonderful they are, and you know, all these metrics that they're very proud of, which is great. I want to understand the why, and then I want to understand the how. Everyone else wants to start with the what. Like, everybody who's talking to me wants to start with, this is what I did, this is what I did. I want to know why you did it, then I want to know how you did it. And if you understand those, then you can take your success and replicate it a couple other times.
When you say the why, right? When you say the why, do you mean, for instance, a lot of times people talk about why in terms of what motivates them, right? Either personally or professionally, and those types of things. Is that what you mean? Or do you mean something different?
I mean why they're, you know, why the action you took in this scenario was successful.
Okay.
Right. So I'll give you an example of one I heard recently that I thought I was really impressed with.
Okay.
They started the story. It was the largest deal they had closed, right? And they were very proud of it. And I was, okay, tell me a little bit about how you got there. Well, we got the CRO in the room and brought a bunch of lieutenants and ended up selling a deal there. It's like, okay, how did you get the CRO's attention? Well, they were actually ignoring us for a very long time. And so through understanding different, you know, lieutenants of the CRO, understanding what was very important to them, they ended up putting together an event solely focused on the topic that was very important to the CRO, had a thought leader from Salesforce come and speak on that, and then invited the CRO to that event. And so the why is, you know, they knew they had to get to the CRO. They knew the CRO was ignoring these questions. So they put together a event specifically for a CRO. They ended up inviting, like, you know, 25, 50 people to it, but got the CRO and a couple other lieutenants to attend as well. And that is what actually ended up sealing the deal. So I thought that was a very clever way of getting to where you need to be.
I know I've used this analogy before, but it's worth repeating, which is that it's kind of like when you were in grade school or high school, really, and you're starting to learn, well, hopefully I guess grade school, you're learning long division. And, you know, you can come up with the answer, and the answer is, say, whatever it is, right, 245. And then the teacher says, show me your work, right? And you didn't just use a calculator, you understood how to get there in terms of carrying numbers and, you know, whatever else needs to be done in long division to get there. So it's
I don't remember either.
Yeah, that's about as far as I'm going to go, is carrying some random number, crossing off something and carrying something, but whatever it is. Yeah. Okay. I get that.
But that's exactly right. Can you show your work? That's a really good analogy.
Yep. Okay. Okay. And what about let's say the almost like the opposite is true, right? In other words, you talk about metrics and the numbers and all this stuff, but listen, frankly, this year is a perfect example of that, right? Where people aren't necessarily exceeding their numbers, not even meeting their numbers, right? When let's just remove the current situation that's going on right now with COVID-19 and all that, but let's just say it was 2018 and you're meeting with someone who was honest with you and said, I didn't hit my number, I was only 70%, and but they were able to articulate to you the why and the how in a deal. And then you have somebody else who, and by the way, can you verify these numbers? Not really. Certainly not while you're sitting there across from somebody who tells you they're 150% of the number. You can't verify it, I guess, anyways. But if somebody's really honest with you and says that they didn't hit their number, or they struggled for whatever reason, but they were able to articulate the why and the how, is that someone that you would still consider, just given their thought process and understanding that you have a smart person in front of you? Or are you saying, this person struggled over the last couple of years, I'm afraid they're not going to be able to do it here?
So that's actually something I look for, is that they have had, and it's a question I'll ask specifically is, give me a time personally or professionally where it didn't go well, and I don't want the hero story, right? Where you fall in a hole and look how great I am, I fixed all the problems. I want to hear that you fell in a hole and you have had a hard time, and what, do you have the mental fortitude and the resilience to get through that? Because the sales profession is a very difficult profession, and you need to have the mental fortitude to be told no 70% of the time, to have a 30% win rate, which is pretty good.
Right. It's also a good batting average.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So all right. So let me ask you this then. Actually, so let's add some context to this a little bit, I guess. How many, just from your years of management, how many people have you coached, led, people have reported to you over the period of time?
Call it 30 or 40.
Okay. And what would you say, given all the conversations that you've had with them, all the meetings that you've had, all of the input and output that you've seen from them, and then also the people that you've either wanted to hire that didn't come on board as well. What have you seen to be the difference between the best salespeople and those who have struggled more so than not?
I think it would come back to that mental fortitude, or the grit is one of the number one things I look for. Another thing I really look for is around, are you detail oriented, right? Because the details really matter when you're trying to pitch something. I've seen deals lost because the presentation had somebody else's logo in it. And that sloppy work I don't really have room for in my organization. So I would say the mental fortitude to keep going is probably one of the main things. And then are you detail oriented to show the polish when you need it?
If you miss that during the interview process, how do you enable that? How do you coach, for instance, like mental fortitude, right? In other words, it's, how do you coach that? How do you enable that? How do you get people to keep going when they may not have come with that in the first place? Or can you? Or if you can't, you just manage them out.
So if I'm fortunate, I'll get to work with a sales rep for 2, maybe 3 years. If they have the will, we'll find the way, right? But if it's a personality mismatch, they spend 35, 40 years coming up with this personality. I don't know that I'm going to change that in my year and a half, right? If it's truly a personality thing. But I am a big believer that anything can be learned, including mental fortitude, right? Which is one of the reasons I ask about that, that challenging time in your life, and personally or professionally. It doesn't need to be you lost a big deal that you were hoping for. I've had people talk about sickness in the family, or and that is, I have hired people because of that, because they told me a story that resonated, that said, this person has the will to get through. And then it's up to the leadership team and the people around them to kind of understand what motivates them, where their genius lies, because everybody's really good at something. And I need to figure that out and kind of direct it in the right spot.
I've been meaning to ask a lot of sales leaders this question lately, certainly probably over the last maybe 10 or 15 interviews, and I've neglected to. I don't know why, but I'm going to ask you. So you'll be the first one, which is, the answer to that question always comes down to soft skills, right? Always. I don't think there's been one instance where it's been a hard skill that you can actually look at on a resume. However, if I talk to, for instance, I was talking to a company today that's looking to hire people, and I have people interviewing at various companies now, and oftentimes, to get the conversation started, or to even continue the conversation, let's say, for instance, after a phone screen, there is where relevant experience or like domain expertise or domain knowledge, which shows up on a resume, but it's certainly not going to show up as a but it's not necessarily tied to a soft skill. So within that, in terms of mental fortitude and detail-oriented, and you talk about looking for smart people and teasing that out, where do you put a particular hard skill like domain expertise, understanding buyer's persona, knowledge of sales motion, like where do those things fit? And how high up?
Yeah, those are, I would say, table stakes, right?
Okay.
You have to be a good presenter. You have to be able to carry a conversation. You have to, come in, and you have to know how technology works if you're going to be selling technology, right? Like these are all kind of table stakes, I would say, and those are skills that can be worked on, but we have bigger stuff to work on than that.
So let me ask you this then. If they, for instance, have sold to marketing, the marketing side or the business side of the house, line of business versus the technical side of the house, right? Does that matter? If they've sold something that is, well, yeah, like let's say, for instance, they're selling something like Salesforce, which is, more for, front end type stuff as opposed to something that might be back end because they're having different conversations. Like, does that matter?
Not as much as you think.
Okay.
We can teach the technology. That is something that I'm okay teaching the technology. I'm okay. That is something that we can do. One of the best salespeople that I've worked with at Salesforce, the job he had before was selling concrete. So,
wow.
It's not as important. It's the previous experience is a signal that you've done it before, right? So that's good. But it's not the end all and be all. And I think sales leaders are doing themselves a disservice if they don't take the time to look elsewhere.
How long was he selling concrete? Is this somebody that was just selling it in high school and college and then he was a BDR, or is this somebody who was selling it for the, into his career and then you brought him in and just put him into a mid-market position?
He was selling it into, his dad owned the company, so he was working in sales there, and then he joined Salesforce in like a SMB sales role. So, but has since climbed the ranks. I feel like every time the seasons change, he's got a promotion. So
wow, interesting. Because
of his results, he's just unbelievably driven and very smart and can figure it out.
And what about sales process or sales motion congruency? Obviously, in that case, and of course, it's a huge outlier when we talk about somebody that was selling concrete, but generally speaking, does that matter, right? In other words, their ability to quarterback, you know, a deal, you know, manage the sales process and all those things.
Yeah. Yeah, that matters. Having a sales process is incredibly important. Having a sales process is incredibly important to know, one, to get everybody in the same company speaking the same language. So if you tell me that we're at 50%, I know what 50% means. You tell me we're at stage 2, I know what stage 2 means. And I know, I was talking about this earlier today, actually, and once you've done the sales process, for newer salespeople, learning the sales process is incredibly important, and internalizing it is incredibly important. But I liken it to, you know, playing chords on a guitar, right? In order to learn the chords, you got to kind of practice and practice and practice and do it the right way, do it the way the instructor says. But you would be shocked to know, well, maybe not, I don't know how much of a musician you are, but 80% of the most popular songs in the world are done with the chords G, C, and D, which means that you got to know the notes, but I'm going to leave it up to you to play the order that you think is best, because I trust you to know, right? But we got to teach you the different steps, and maybe we do stage 3, stage 1, stage 2, stage 4, and they all have to happen, but it's not always as clean cut as we'd like to think it is when we put it down.
Got it. Yep, that makes sense. Okay, and I guess then the answer to this question might be similar, which is that, you know, I got a lot of people that, for instance, again, I'm interviewing for a position right now where the hiring manager is trying to thread the needle between someone that is enterprise and mid-market, right? They want them to be, I'll call it, strategically transactional. So they're not spending a year, right, on an elephant, let's just say, right? But yet they have those skills, I guess, if you will, but they need to move shorten the sales cycles and move through the process almost as, you know, and putting their transactional hat on, which might be 6 months, let's just say, but, you know, one of those types of things. So someone who, let's say, for instance, has been an SMB or a mid-market account executive for several years, comes to you now, sitting across from you, or, you know, present their resume, and it's for an enterprise sales role. Obviously they hadn't done it before. What are you looking for as evidence to say this is going to inspire enough confidence in you to continue moving them forward, or to even consider them at all?
I would have some questions around why they aren't looking for an enterprise role if they, you know, I'm assuming they've been successful in each of these roles. I would have some questions around why they aren't looking for an enterprise role in their current company, right? Is there something that's what I would want to understand, and then depending on that answer, you know, start to test in where do they fit, how long are they going to take to ramp to get to an enterprise sale. We look for people who are kind of on a rocket ship, because we want to hire people, get them really good, and then promote them. That's right. The goal.
Why do you actually, you know what, you mentioned something earlier that I'm curious about as it pertains to what you just said, which is, why do you hope, I guess, to get 2 to 3 years out of somebody, or why do you expect only to get 2 to 3 years? What do you think it is about salespeople, I guess, these days?
I'm not sure it's salespeople, but we hire really high performers, and high performers expect they expect growth, right? They have a growth mindset. They want to take something on, master it, and then be stretched. And so I think 2 to 3 years is a good amount of time to, you know, take 6 months to understand it, another 6 months to master it. We get a year of actual productivity out of you, maybe a year and a half, and then we want to keep you in the company, so we would promote you up.
And if there's no place for them to go, given their growth mindset, then that's where they might start to get a little bit itchy.
Get a little bit itchy and start looking elsewhere. And, you know, we at Salesforce, we spend a lot of time and energy hiring, and when we make a good hire, we want to keep them in the company. And if sales is not where they need to be, again, we want to find what they're really good at naturally and try and find a role for them.
How do you manage underperformers, the people that are struggling? And is there a path for someone that is struggling to turn it around and be a consistent overachiever?
Yes, 100%. The underperformance, it's in sales, it's strange. Everybody knows exactly how good you are at your job, right? You're 83% good at your job, or you're 140% good at your job, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the only careers where it's kind of hard to hide behind a desk all day. But we look at the will, for sure, right? Is there a will to improve? Are they taking the initiative on that, right? If I have to come to you and say, so because everybody knows exactly how good they are at their job, why is it up to me to come to you and say, you're underperforming, you need to step it up? What I would look for is someone to come to me and say, I need help on my pipeline. Who can help me? And then we'll scour the organization and throw every single resource at it, right? But if I'm chasing you, we're not hiding anything here. It's very, very clear exactly where people stand. And then I look for the sort of the getting it done and doing it right scale, right? If you're getting it done, but you're not doing it right, like, you're not going to get promoted that way. If you're doing it right, we all firmly believe that if you do the right things, eventually you'll be in the getting it done category. And if you're getting it done and doing it right, you're a rocket ship.
So when you say getting it done and not doing it right, what is the getting it done part? They are hitting their numbers, but they're not doing it right? Or is the getting it done part, like, what is the getting it done part?
Yeah, I mean, we're a CRM company. We have metrics for everything, right? A lot of people can hide behind metrics, right? So maybe you've generated $10 million in pipeline this month, but none of it's real. There's no follow-up. So yeah, we had a pipeline target at $10 million, and yeah, you hit it, but did you really? Right. So that's sort of what I mean. Yeah, same thing. Maybe, a bluebird falls in your hand and you blow out your number one month, but those are great months. Happy to have them, but it's not sustainable, and it's not good business to run that way.
When salespeople struggle, or I hate to say this, but I guess maybe use the excuse that they're struggling because there's not enough to eat, right? In other words, the territory is too small, or the customers that they're calling on have been called on 1,000 times, right? There are those types of things. How much of that is, maybe there's some foundation to that, and then how much of it is actual, like, they're not putting in the right effort? And I guess the better question would be, how do you know as a sales leader, whether it be during the interview process or as you're managing them on your team, maybe sitting down with a QBR, to know what to believe, I guess, a way to go with it?
Again, I like to walk people through that to its natural conclusion, which is the territory is too thin, right? Or whatever. Let's walk that through. So what does that mean? That means I have too many salespeople for the territory. So you're telling me that I should not have as many salespeople as I do. As a salesperson, you're telling me that I have too many salespeople.
Right.
Is that the conversation we should be having right now? Or should we try and find a way? Right. So let's be very clear about what we're saying. Because I'm going to choose not to believe you, so we don't have to have a different conversation. So let's figure out a way.
Interesting. Okay, so you were hitting on something there. Too many salespeople, right? I've worked with a lot of fast-growing startup, technology companies who at some point they run into that, right? I've talked to sales leaders who have not acknowledged that, I guess, right? But let's say, for instance, in this particular case, right, especially someone like you who's been around within the same organization for a while and ultimately knows, right? If the salesperson's perception is, yes, there are too many salespeople in this territory and there's not enough for me to eat, then the next part of that conversation is really around essentially what we were talking about earlier in terms of walking them through, leading them down the path of, no, that's not the right answer. The right answer is that you're just not maybe strategic, looking at your territory in the right way. Like you need to be more strategic, or you need to be putting in more effort. That's ultimately where the conversation goes, right?
Well, the question is like, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Okay. And I remember this from years ago, and it stuck with me because every year at Salesforce, the territories get smaller and the quota goes up. It's
right.
The nature of the business, right?
Yep.
Any sales organization will, territory, we're growth, territories get smaller, quota goes up year after year. And 12 years later, I keep thinking it's not going to work. And 12 years later, I keep being wrong. And I remember, this is probably 5 or 6 years ago. So one of my mentors was asked in a QBR, standing up there, said, this happens every year. When is it going to stop? And he simply said, it's going to stop when it stops working. And I thought that was really profound, right?
Yes. So let me ask you this then. What's the stop when it stops working? I'm assuming where my mind goes is that when we as an organization, Salesforce in this case, MuleSoft, stops growing, right? When we stop hitting, when we go flat, so to speak, and the growth stops. Is that top line? Is that what you mean when you say stop working?
I mean, that's what I think he meant.
Right, okay.
At the time is, this has been working.
Mm-hmm.
We are a growth company. In order, if you sign on 25 new accounts each year, and the average account executive should have 10 accounts, let's say, you just made 2.5 new territories, right?
Right.
So that's good. Let's get in. Let's talk to them more. It's better for our customers. Like it's a double-edged sword, because it's better for our customers in terms of they get more attention, and we can actually help them. Mm-hmm. It's worse for our customers because it's a pain to switch account executives, right?
Right.
It's just it's something that we've had to deal with. But
so let me ask you this question then: Is there an expectation from leadership that a percent, given what we just talked about, a percentage of your salespeople aren't going to hit their number, given the way you have the growth mindset, which some salespeople might say is a detrimental to their own productivity? Is there, and you've been there for quite a while, is there a number there that says, or just even, I guess, the data that says historically we're going to have X amount of people hit the number, we're going to presume that a certain percentage of people aren't going to hit that number?
Yes, those numbers are above my pay grade, but there is we're sort of in the middle of territory planning for next year right now. There is a ton of effort that goes into trying to ensure equity across territories. It is 100% top of mind for everybody, but it is a very hard problem to solve. I liken it to predicting the weather, right? Because we're trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. We've given you an 80% chance of sunshine. You got to make up the 20%, right? We try to give everybody a fair number of accounts, type of accounts, relationships, existing footprint, prospect accounts. Like we take all of this into consideration: size, spend, tech spend, all this stuff. There's this huge machine that kind of tries to spit out a fair territory. And then there's some eyeballs on it that go in and actually look, do these numbers actually make sense? And we try and make it as equitable as possible. But it is a hard problem to solve. And if anybody tells you different, I would like to talk to them, because I am currently trying to solve that problem right now.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that is because, it's funny, when I talk to salespeople that are struggling with that, like from my perspective as someone who's, frankly hopes that I'm not going to be wasting Brent Taylor's time when I send him a candidate that I talk to that I like. And part of what I have to do is discern from the outside looking in, okay, well, is this real or is this an excuse, right? Is this something that's really they're struggling with internally? And what does, one of the questions I always ask is, or sometimes candidates will just volunteer, only 20% of the team hit their number last year, or only whatever, right? There are benchmarks that people cite to essentially say that, for lack of a better term, the odds are stacked against me. And then we go back into some of the stuff that you and I were talking about earlier, which is the why and the how and evidence of smart people, right? And it seems to be there's the struggle there.
I will tell you a time somebody came to me and said, my territory sucks, which, I've had that conversation a lot of times. And so we started to dig in, and I was questioning, okay, well, tell me about the territory. What's the main industries in your territory? What are the trends in those industries? What have you done so far? And they had really good answers to all of those. And they had reached out to a bunch of different people. They had reached out to industry experts. They had tried to put on events in the territory. They tried to, and we ended up giving them more territory because they had proven their point, right? But just coming to me and saying the territory sucks with nothing to back it up, that's a losing strategy with me.
Let me ask you this: how has COVID-19 affected your expectations for this year, Q2, Q3, Q4, the whole nine, or I'll say forecast? And then when did you adjust your forecast given what's happening? And then is that reflected in the productivity that you're expecting out of your reps? Like how does that work?
Mm-hmm. Great question. I think it's affected all of us. Mm-hmm. Nothing like this has ever happened before. So there's a lot of uncertainty internally. There's a lot of uncertainty with our customers. We sell to all sorts of customers. So we've had some customers who have been absolutely devastated. We also have some customers who can't keep up with the amount of business coming in because of the shift to everybody going online. So what we've tried to done is take a very try and lead with empathy, I think, is the big thing we're trying to do. And, my own situation, I've got, my wife works full time. I've got 2 really young kids. I'm surprised they haven't interrupted yet. And everybody's in a bit of a different kind of working stage right now. So we're at the same time, we're more distant. I feel like I know a little bit more about each of my reps just by kind of getting more of the one-on-one time. Expectations haven't really changed. We still are, we're still responsible for a number. We still, need to deliver on that. What's changed is the how we're going to do it. It used to be very much a face-to-face conversation, not a virtual. But we figured out, we pivoted very quickly. All our events went virtual. We had one of our largest events in April.
Wow, no kidding.
In Chicago. And, we shut down in March, and our marketing team was incredible and pivoted fully to virtual. We ended up getting more people there. We ended up having better conversations. It was incredible. It was an incredible thing to see and inspiring, really. But yeah, I think leading with empathy, understanding where people are, and I have people on my team who, they're single and they live in a condo. I feel like that's harder than me and my family and the amount of stuff that we have going on, just that mental fortitude, right? So try and lead with empathy and understand.
But okay, got that. The forecast and everything else stays the same.
The number's the number. Again, I don't want to take that to its logical conclusion.
Right. Right. Well, okay. I'm curious about the how real quickly. Only, again, one of the reasons I like doing this podcast is I get to get answers from smart guys like you when I don't know the answers to these questions, and it's just really cool.
Do my best.
Is it about, you mentioned marketing, which is why I brought this up. Tactically, is it about putting more in at the top of the funnel because you know that budgets are smaller now, likely, or at least moved to another quarter? So in other words, before, where you needed to have, a certain amount at the top of the funnel in terms of prospects or what might be in the pipeline, so to speak, you have to, multiply that by a factor of whatever it is, because you know that because the ratios are always going to be the ratios. Typically, if you look at the data in terms of, leads to meetings to second meetings and those types of things. What's the answer to that?
If you know, I'd like to know. My hypothesis has been we need to over-rotate onto the business value, the business initiatives that we're tying to, and getting to dollars and cents faster, right? What for every dollar you spend on MuleSoft, how much are you getting back, and can we prove it, right? So if we can, when it comes down to budgets are limited, I got to pick A or B. B gets me B times 5. I'll take a B, right?
I wonder if time has to do with that too. In other words, is ROI, and then there's how quickly that ROI is an ROI, right? In other words, is it, does that realize itself a year from now, or does it realize itself immediately,
Yeah, exactly. And those are, listen, running a business right now is really hard. Like, there are very difficult decisions to be made. I have a couple of friends who are founders of companies, and they're, they've had to make some really tough calls. So I don't envy that position. I just want to make the decision as easy as possible.
Yep, makes sense. Okay. All right, let's end with some easier questions, shall we? Questions that I believe you can probably answer. Actually, and before we actually get into which, by the way, guys that are listening, it's the Rapid Fire 5, which I try to remember to ask every person. You'll hear a couple, I think, before this one with Brent that I neglected to, but you'll certainly hear them from him. But before we get into those, are you hiring, and for which positions are you hiring, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, MuleSoft as a whole is hiring. Reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will get you in touch with the right person. We're hiring enterprise sales executives. MuleSoft Canada is hiring Eastern Canada and Western Canada. So again, just reach out to me. I'll get you in touch with the right person.
Fantastic. Okay, and we mentioned over quota too as well. That'll get you to the top of his priority.
Absolutely.
List. There you go. Okay, Rapid Fire 5. You ready?
Ready.
All right. What are you most excited about right now, either personally or professionally?
Personally, I just got back from a canoe trip with my 2 sons. They did absolutely nothing on the entire trip, but I got a lot of great photos, and it was a blast to be just with them, totally disconnected from, I didn't have the ability to check anything, and neither did they. And that was just a ton of fun. Professionally, I feel a momentum swing happening with the companies that I'm talking to. It feels like people are starting to come out of their bomb shelters, and it feels like we're just really gearing up for a second half to crush.
It's funny, I feel the same way, and in talking to my peers, they feel the same way too. Not even feel, you can literally just see it in the activity. How old are your sons?
I have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. So they're 20 months apart. The 4-year-old just had his birthday yesterday, actually.
Awesome. That must have been really, really fun. What activity do you miss the most since shelter in place began. And I'll actually add this caveat, guys. He's in Canada. I mentioned it, I think, at the top, but he's in Canada, certainly doing much better than the States, but to say the least. But tell me about that. And are you guys still fully, like, still sheltered in place a lot? Or, I mean, not sheltered in place, but
not sheltered in place. There's still, we're at what do they call it? Phase 3 now. So
okay.
Got to wear your mask indoors, still social distancing when you can, but most stuff is open now. What do I miss most? I miss the end of the quarter rush where everyone's, hearts are breaking and praises are being sung. And then we all go downstairs and grab a beer and celebrate and commiserate. I miss that a lot.
Yeah, makes sense. Can you share a piece of advice or tool that you use to help you stay productive?
Again, it's going to sound self-serving, but Salesforce.com. I live and breathe it. I don't know how people do their job without something like that.
Yep. Okay. I skipped one. What keeps you motivated?
I believe that Canadian companies need to be more competitive on the world stage. And I think if they adopt the technology that Salesforce has, they will be. So I sort of have a personal mission to make sure that there's a lot of really good Canadian companies for my kids to work at when they're older.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Makes sense. I get that. And you mentioned LinkedIn as the answer to how should people get in touch with you regarding the jobs. I'm assuming then that would be the answer for the best way for people to connect with you.
Yes, that's probably the best way. Again, it's Brent Taylor with an N. Brent Taylor is our COO, who I've gotten a couple of his emails, but never any of his paychecks or stock options. So I'm still waiting on that.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah.
There's still hope.
But fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fantastic. Brent Taylor. I had to pause there for a second. I was like, wait a minute, what am I calling you? Brent Taylor. Thank you for going over quota. It's been great. Goodbye, everybody.